What do you charge the US federal government on these contracts that you are bidding on? If you're new to the channel, welcome. And for our continued subscribers, welcome back to another video. Today we're talking about on a $100,000 contract, are we charging $5K, $10, $20,000? Can we charge $30, $40, $50,000? Can we do that? Got a whole list of things to go through here with you today. So today's going to be a good one. Again, if you are new here, the analytics are showing me that most of you guys watching these videos these days are brand new people that are not subscribed to the channel. So we'll take a second for you to subscribe right now. Click subscribe and click like if you don't mind as well. And we'll just pause. Perfect. So today we are going to cover specifically though, contract types when it comes to what to charge the government. We're going to talk about direct versus indirect costs or direct versus indirect pricing costs to consider when determining what to charge the government. We're looking at incumbents, research. Okay, this is a factor when determining what to charge the government. We're also looking at risk and contingencies on contracts when determining what to charge the government. We're looking at evaluation stuff, what's actually in the solicitation when factoring in what to charge the government. We're also going to cover some ranges, pricing ranges, above, below, specific numbers. So that's some of the good stuff. So I'll save that for a little bit later on. Also, profitability when it comes to what to charge the government. So some of these contract types, you've probably heard of some of these, but you might not know exactly what they mean. And some of you newbies to GovCon, you may have never even heard of them. Okay, so this will plant some seeds. The first one that I want you all to be most familiar with, okay, this is going to be the most important, at least for right now in your foreseeable future, is FFP contracts, firm fixed price contracts. If you're taking notes, FFP is fine, firm fixed price contracts. These contracts are really important when determining what to charge the government because you're essentially submitting one number. One number. And there might be a little bit of a breakdown. It might be divided over a couple of pricing CLINs. But because it's so important, because you're submitting one number, it's got to have everything in it. It's got to be totally rolled up. Okay? So it's not one number and your profit, for example. It shall include your profit. I've heard of people bidding on contracts where they're like, okay, I submitted my number, but then where do I put my profit? And it's like, that number was supposed to include your profit. So you're probably going to win the contract depending on the evaluation because you're going to come in so low because you didn't price for your profit. So firm fixed price contracts are all one number. So this includes a subcontractor's cost, for example. It includes anything you have to purchase, any time, any overhead, any G&A, any other indirect costs, and your profit. It's just everything. It's one number, and like I said, it could be broken down, but it's very often, when it's all rolled up, it is one number to a firm fixed price. And what that means is, if you miscalculated something and you underpriced and you need more money, that's typically not going to happen with a firm fixed price. Now, yes, the contract could be modded, and sure, there can be adjustments made, perhaps, but by and large, you better make sure you cover everything. And the good news is if you overcharge and you happen to win, and I'm not telling you to overcharge the government, but I'm saying, let me take that back. If you do the job for less money, and so you're making an above amount, an over amount is what I'm trying to say, than what you planned on, well, that's great because that all just goes down to the bottom line as profit. Okay, so you think it's going to cost you to do 70K, right? And say you win the contract for 90,000, but then you end up being able to do it for 60,000 or 62,000. Something happens, right? Maybe you find a replacement sub, maybe you find a more direct approach. Maybe if it's supplies, you find an acceptable alternate, right? Something like that. Okay, well, great. That's $8,000 in profit on a very small contract already, but an additional $8,000 profit going straight down to the bottom line. Those types of things are possible. These scenarios, situations can exist in a firm fixed price contract. We also have cost reimbursement contracts. Cost reimbursement contracts are going to, and the next few, quite honestly, are going to be pretty much on the nose, so I won't explain them as much because they're more intuitive by name and nature. But it is important that you know about them when it comes to determining what to charge the government, because every one of these changes how you and what you charge to the government, okay? So with cost reimbursement contracts, it's, well, what's it going to cost, right? Plus your fee. So these have to be allowable costs. The big one with this, if you're taking notes, is it has to be costs that are allowable. And you can just type in allowable costs online. I don't have the link for you right now, but in accounting, there's costs that are allowable and unallowable. For example, buying alcohol would be an obvious, like, okay, we're not expensing that to the contract, right? And there's other items, of course, that are more in the gray. But cost reimbursement contracts, the big one is these costs have to be allowable, okay? So more specifically, they have to be, related in some way to performing on the contract too. This isn't going to be 100% G&A write-off where it's like, it's something that you could be using to support the contract, but in no way does it make sense for this contract. It's not going to be allowable, okay? And like I said, I'm not going to go too much into allowable versus unallowable, but you can find lots of great research online, probably even YouTube University as well, or maybe I'll do another video on it related to GovCon topics. I just don't have that information in front of me for this video, but I just want you to know cost reimbursement contracts, again, when determining what to charge the government, it's just going to be what is the cost and then your fee. So for example, if you'll have to reproduce what the true costs were. So if you do it for less, you're not going to be able to charge the initial amount. Okay, then you're only going to charge them less. So it's different. You see what I'm saying? So then your fee is going to be what your fee is going to be. There's less places to like hide the money or just have profitability because the government's scrutinizing and looking at the contract different. And as you can imagine with these different contract types, when it comes to what to charge the government, it's going to apply for different types of contracts, different scopes of contracts, different dollar value of contracts. The larger the contract, some of these are going to apply more. And the smaller the contract, you might find yourself going more in another direction. For example, like firm fixed price. So next we have time and material contracts, which is also another on the nose. So time and materials is, again, it's the time. So it's going to be more like a multiplier, a rate, and then the cost of materials, okay? And in your rates, you typically will have your profit built into your rates because you're typically not making profit, charging profit on materials. So if it's time and materials, and this is your rates, and this is the cost of materials, the whole project calculation is essentially going to be, well, how much time and how much material does the work require to complete, right? And again, it's a moving thing. So if it's more time or less time, okay, you can see that cost directly, proportionally change with that, since that is the main multiplier. We also have, and you may have heard of these, you may not totally understand them, but IDIQ or task order contracts, indefinite delivery or indefinite quantity contracts. These are contracts where if you win, it's not like you're getting a contract to do something. It's more like you're on the IDIQ, right? Or you're on the BPA, you're on the blanket purchase agreement if you're taking notes, IDIQ, BPA. Okay, we're talking task orders. After you win, there's going to be individual task orders after that, where you will either have to provide new pricing or you will have to price based off of, for example, the rates that you were awarded and accepted into the IDIQ. Say they'll have you price based on a sample project because, the task orders can vary widely. And they don't want to have to cut 20 different contracts for each of these individual task orders because they're going to be so similar in nature. It's just going to not be the best use of contracting's time and money to do that, even yours as well as a bidder. So instead, get on the MATOC or get on the IDIQ or get on the BPA and price a sample project where it will be similar to what they expect these task orders to be. So then we can kind of carry over your pricing to what these individual task orders would be, bigger, smaller, or pretty similar if you are awarded. Now there could also be multiple awardees with this, so this adds an additional layer. So you may not be the only one because there could be dozens and dozens or hundreds and hundreds, and they don't expect you to be able to perform on all these task orders. So maybe there's 3 of you, maybe there's 4 of you, maybe it's a large one and there's 20 of you. Okay, so then you all bid on the individual task orders and they do their best to kind of like spread it around. The main thing is they want you remaining active, otherwise they may on-ramp and off-ramp where they could kick you off. Okay, anyways, I don't want to go too much into it today, but as you can imagine, firm fixed price, cost reimbursement, time and materials, and then IDIQ/task order based contracts. If you're taking notes, those would be the big 4 contract types that can greatly affect what and how you are charging the government. And maybe some of the stuff you haven't heard yet. I certainly haven't spoken about a lot of it, so if you're on my channel a lot of this probably is new to you. So I'm planting seeds. When you see these things in your solicitation, and it's something other than the standard firm fixed price, you'll have a bit of inclination now of what that could mean and what consequence that has on you as a bidder. Now, we also have direct versus indirect costs when it comes to what to charge the government. And I've kind of touched on a little bit. I've been touching on videos here and there lately when it comes to pricing, because I'm trying to, in this past year, I'm trying to plant different types of seeds and get you understanding generally acceptable accounting principles, GAAP principles, but also laying the foundation for your government contracting business. It's not going to matter when you're just starting out per se, and you don't have any contracts, you don't have any revenue, but as your business grows, you want to be thinking increasingly about direct versus indirect costs when it comes to how you're charging the government. So what are direct costs? Direct costs are costs directly related to the contract. For example, if you're buying materials, or like the contract calls for you to deliver 20 4x4s, well, those 4x4s are going to be a direct cost. Like those costs would not exist without them requesting that particular item in the contract. Direct costs could also be if you're paying a teaming partner, subcontractor. They are working directly on that particular contract. It is a direct cost. So anything directly related. If you have to travel can be a direct cost. You know, you're going to the site, direct meetings, these are just pure to the contract. Indirect costs can be, well, let's break it down. Direct costs can be overhead and G&A, and I promise I won't go too much into this because there's other videos for this. But if you're taking notes, indirect costs can be overhead and G&A. They can also be fringe. Overhead is going to be an indirect cost that's directly related to the contract. But it could be a shared cost. So for example, if there's a room that you're using, but you use that room for other contracts or other things, well, it's still on the contract, right? But it's indirect because it's shared. It's one way to think about it. We also have G&A though. It's similar, and sometimes for certain items, the accountants will tell you, it can be difficult to explicitly say, well, what's overhead, what's G&A? And the answer typically is going to be from an accounting standpoint when it comes to, especially when you're determining what to charge the government, is are you being consistent? Are you charging it the same way? That's very often in accounting the name of the game, especially if you get audited. Are you being consistent? Do you have this list of procedures of how you charge repeatedly so that you're not like double dipping or going back and forth? That's what these guys care about, okay? But G&A is also an indirect cost, but it's more for running of the business. So if you have an HR person, sure, they can spill over to helping you in this contract, but they're doing so many other things in the business. Or say you have a printer. How many other things is that, or your marketing, right? That's for the whole business. And sure, it can relate to this contract as an indirect cost, but there's so many other things. And then we also have fringe. So if you have people on a contract, but they're also working on other contracts, okay, fringe, FICA, FUTA, SUTA, think of payroll expenses, Social Security, employer costs. We also are able to charge fringe as an indirect cost. And sometimes these costs are actually direct if it's like a staffed person directly on that contract. It's the only thing they do. Okay, but very often people wear multiple hats and do different things. So that is a discriminator there. But man, guys, do you see what we're getting into? And if you're taking notes, with direct versus indirect costs when it comes to what you're charging the government, this is eventually, that's why I'm done. I'm not going any deeper than I just did, because I don't want to freak any of you out, especially if you're brand new. It's not necessary. But this is more of a one-size-fit-all type thing, so that if you're new, okay, you'll be over-prepared. And if you are winning dozens of contracts, or you're billing out for dozens of contracts, this is the sort of stuff that you want to start paying attention to with your accountant. Because you will one day run into contracts where a contracting officer is looking to see if you are charging acceptable rates. How much is your G&A rate? How much is your overhead rate? How much is your fringe rate? Are they within an acceptable range for your company? For smaller contracts, for firm fixed price contracts, for most of you guys watching this right now, we're just planting seeds, okay? But you're better for it. You're more informed for it. Now, next, incumbent pricing. Of course, this is something that, now we're back into familiar territory, most of you. If you don't know, an incumbent is a company that's provided the work previously. They've done the work in the past, or maybe it's ongoing and they're still doing it, and their contract is coming up for a bid recompete, pretty soon here. What are they charging? Of course, that should be a huge basis for what you're going to charge. And you're probably going to have to come under them because they're going to have way better past performance. They're going to have a way better technical. Whatever it's asking for, they're going to beat you. But you have an opportunity to dethrone an incumbent by beating them on price, because their price is made public. But you need to know the incumbent name, so you need to know the company name, and then you do your research. You start out by asking contracting, you submit an RFI. Is there an incumbent? If so, what is their name and what was the previous awarded dollar value? Maybe they won't give you all that info, but maybe they'll just give you the name. Then you go and you look it up on FPDS. Dramatically affects what to charge the government. One of the first questions, one of the best first questions, always. Because if there is an incumbent or there was in the past, you're just going to save yourself so much heartache. Now the scope could change, so you want to keep, it's not necessarily apples to apples, cookie cutter type thing. They could add scope, they could de-scope, which will change the pricing. But man, is it an important thing to ask and to find out sooner than later. Contingency and risk. Okay, now we're getting to more profit considerations. How risky is the contract? Think of the movie War Dogs. Okay, so a lot of you guys have seen the movie War Dogs. Remember one of the early contracts for those Berettas, for those handguns? They're handguns, right? I'm not a gun person. Imagine when they had to go through the triangle of death, they called it, right? And David Pacquiao, he's got his channel now. Maybe some of you watch his channel. So maybe he even tells this story in greater detail. I'm not sure. I don't watch his videos. But I saw the movie with War Dogs. Imagine the risk. Because they're getting chased. Because what happened was, if you're not familiar, the story was they won this contract to provide so many Berettas. And I don't know what agency was. It was a military agency. So let's just say the Army, for example. stationed out in the Middle East, and something happened, and they couldn't move the weapons, right? So they went to all these different countries, and they couldn't get them out of country. So they needed to get them themselves and deliver them themselves, which had them taking those Berettas over to the Middle East, driving through the Triangle of Death or whatever it was, and driving up to kind of the camp in the desert saying, hi, sir, we've got your Berettas. And he couldn't believe that the contractor themselves, two of them, had actually showed up and delivered on the contract. And up to that point, there was a lot of anger and frustration, and they're doing phone calls because he's like, get me these Berettas now, we need them. And they're like, we can't, we're having all these issues, but they solved the problem and they figured it out. And they probably made a lot more money because they took a lot more risk to get them there themselves rather than just kind of like doing the drop ship thing. You know what I'm saying? Maybe not, I don't know. But do you want to be, driving through the Triangle of Death to deliver a bunch of, to deliver on an arms contract? You're going to want to charge more profit with the risk. That's how I want you thinking about charging profit as opposed to, going above or below what kind of standard rates are. And I will kind of just share some basic standard rates in a few minutes as promised. But when it comes to escalating or de-escalating on the profit, correlate that with risk, okay? How much risk is associated with the contract that you have in front of you? How much risk is associated with that solicitation that you pulled off of Sam 3 days ago, 5 days ago, 8 days ago, and you're watching this video and you're thinking about pricing? How much risk is associated with it? That should absolutely affect your profit. And if there's no risk, like there's very low risk, let's not say no, extremely low risk, okay, maybe you can be a little bit more, conservative. You can pull it back a little bit because you're like, you know what, I don't have to worry about this one. And if there's ways for you as a company to reduce risk, just get the wheels turning, the cogs turning here, in ways where your competitors cannot reduce risk, now we have a competitive advantage because now we can come in on these contracts maybe more competitive on our pricing because we're not accounting for as much risk because we have found unique strategic ways to reduce that. Maybe that's having a point person that you know on the contract and you don't have to deal with the headache and they're local. Maybe it's something else. Probably another good video idea. And I'll have to think about that too, because that's not an easy one. Next, evaluation. So another thing that dramatically affects what you charge the government is what is the solicitation evaluation. It's different for every contract. So this will literally affect how you charge the government for every single contract. And if you know this, you're doing satisfactory, because I don't want to build it up, because it's a requirement in this day and age. You have to be able to read the solicitation. You have to be able to extract what the government's asking for. It's like minimum to get in. But if you aren't and you don't stand a chance. And you're probably going to get lucky even if you win one, and that might be a bad thing. So is it lowest price? Is it best value trade-off? What is it? How is the government wanting you to price? Or in other words, how will the winning bidder be chosen? If you don't fully understand this, you could just be trying to lowest price every contract. And on some of these best value contracts, if you're too low, you're going to run into what's called unreasonable pricing. If you're too high, too low, your price is not going to be. See, here's the thing. The government has what's called an IGCE, an independent government cost estimate, which means before the solicitation, the opportunity and a source is sought, right? Before it even sees the light of day, all the way to the left, the government has a napkin. In realistic terms, they have an Excel sheet And they know what they think this should cost before it even sees daylight, before it even becomes a source of stage one. They already have it calculated out, guys. You're not fooling the government. You're not charging extraordinary amounts unless they're desperate and there's nobody else that can do it and they're sole sourcing. Maybe you can find situations like that. But you are not. Because the government knows what this should cost because they perform their own calculations. Of course they do. They have engineers, they have PMs, the end users, those actually in the mission. They do all this stuff, okay? That comes into shaping the evaluation criteria, lowest price, best value trade-off, whichever one. They take all that into consideration, which means you must take all of that into consideration too. And if you're not, you are missing like 50% of this thing, if not more. You're just not totally with it. Like you're not playing the game yet. It's like your second soccer game or something like that. You need to really learn to read, find the stuff, sections L and M, instruction to offers, evaluation factors, as well as checking the RFIs, the Q&A, as well as like listing descriptions, maybe, yeah, and just asking questions to contracting, like I said. And this is like pre-proposal writing stuff. You figure all this out before you even start writing proposal responses. Really, really important. If you're doing it, it's satisfactory. Like you have to do it. If you're not doing it, you're not quite with it yet. But do you understand how important this is to understand this stuff? Next. So, supplies, let's talk about profit. Fee ranges, what are actual numbers that you can charge, considering all of these things that we've discussed here today. And I'll just tell you, if you're in supplies, you're in the 10 and under club. I'm going to make this very easy. I'm going to contrast supplies and services. Supplies, you are in the 10 and under club. 10% can be a lot on supplies. 5, 6, 7% supplies, it's more standard. If you're bidding supplies, which I don't recommend, if you're bidding supplies, it's kind of the range you're looking at, okay? 10 and under, we're making it easy. Services, 10 and over. 10 and over, well, how much over? Well, it depends on what? We just covered it. It depends on risk. How much risk are you facing? How much anticipated competition is there as well? There's a number of other factors. But today we're really focusing on the risk. If there's no risk, easy breezy in the performance, do 10. It's okay. I'll show you in a minute how to make more money. But lock in a solid 10 so that your offer is competitive. If it's a bit more risk, go 15. Bit more risk, go 20. Above 20, we're not really seeing too many competitive service contracts awarded for more than 20. That doesn't mean that's all the profits you get to make, but in terms of what you're putting into the contract, okay, we're 10 and over, 10, 15, 20, generally acceptable rates for services. Nobody would look at that and question it. And it's also pretty competitive, okay? As again, supplies is 10 and under, and 10 is, going to have to be more risky for you to work your way up to 10. Or it has to be like you're one of a few who can only provide this or have access to this, or maybe there's a very short reseller list and you're on it and there's only a few people that can actually get access to the supplies, right? You can charge more money for that. You're more valuable, okay? But if you're just coming in and you're offering like very little value, don't expect to be able to make all this money that you're going to want to make and be competitive when you're going up against these other very hungry small businesses. I mean, it's, those of you that are bidding, you know this. Like, you know this. You've experienced it. You're saying, yeah, like this is true. That's what it's like. But let's talk about profitability too, because what you charge the government is, goes hand in hand with how much money you're making with your profits. So you don't only profit based off of what you put in for profit. Okay, I don't want to knock any of you off your chair by saying that, but you don't only profit by the profit that you charge. if you remember what we talked about with the different contract types, and so much of what we're talking about now is firm fixed price contracts, right? It's different than just this is your fee and this is all you get. Firm fixed price, if you do it for less, you can make more money. That's why we like services and FFPs, base plus option year contracts, because over these years, not only can you also add a 2 to 3% escalation year on year to account for inflation and economic and environmental considerations, even your subcontractor raising their prices, etc. Okay, that's permissible and acceptable, and that's called balanced pricing, and the government likes to see that because it means that you're less likely to default on year 3 because you're actually, you're kind of having like a graduated scale here. But I've mentioned this in other videos, and I promised I was going to start saying it more, so I'm going to start saying it more. For those of you who are middlemanning, legal middlemanning, teaming, you have the opportunity after the first year to do the work 100% yourself, to 100% self-perform, or to at least self-perform more of the work by putting your own employees on the contract and weaning off of teaming partners. Because guess what? You're paying them as a middle link in that chain between you and the government. So you have an opportunity over time to reduce that or entirely remove it, depending. And because you need to be involved in the contract anyways, right, to meet your limitations on subcontracting, you should be watching and learning, because this is what the government wants you to do. Like, there's nothing wrong with teaming. Teaming's been around forever. There's nothing wrong with subcontractors. That's been around forever. Like, it's a normal thing. But you don't want to over-rely on it for forever, because as a business model, you are less competitive. Okay, what you charge the government has to be higher because you have to account for another company. So if at some point you can start to wean down, reduce, or entirely remove that link in that chain so that you are a self-performance company, like this is just the tip to your spear to get you in, because you don't have a business and you just got your cage code in the last 6 months, but you haven't run a business, okay? So you're teaming with companies that are to get in, but once you get in and you build relationships and all this other stuff that comes after, you do good jobs, your team does good jobs, you can start to take the contract back increasingly. And if you're wanting to make more money and you're wanting to be more competitive on your contracts, it is like part 2 to the message. It's what comes after legal middlemanning, okay? It's increasing self-performing. You get that? So context matters. Legal middlemanning is to get you started. It's a solution when you don't have a business. If you already have a business, you don't need a legal middleman because you're already self-performing. So when you're taking more and more of the contract back, you're becoming more and more profitable, which means, say you won it at 10%, but now you're self-performing, and so you're putting people on your payroll, right? Because that's what it is, and they're working, and you're paying them direct instead of having to pay a teaming partner, a subcontractor, to pay them and their fee. So now that fee is gone and that goes to you. You keep that now. Now you're just paying the person. And maybe you can find even more cost friendly people. Like, because, as long as you're meeting the minimum on the wage determinations, for instance, that's what you have to pay. You don't have to pay so much in excess of that. But you don't know if the teaming partner is putting people on your contract that have worked for them for 8, 10, 12 years, so they have to pay them more. So they have to charge you that cost. Okay? Maybe you can find a person to do this who has 1 to 2 years experience, but they have all the necessary credentials and qualifications. Well, it's going to be cheaper. Well, you're going to make more money. So contract management is as much of a huge piece to this. The proposal and the pricing and what to charge the government, it's getting things started and it's getting you that win. But how you manage it and what you do after can make or break your profitability. If you do a really poor job managing it, you don't do a good job communicating with your subcontractor, you're not communicating with the government, say your subcontractor walks off the job, and then you have to replace them with another subcontractor because you just like totally been hands off with this contract and you're doing it the wrong way. You're not involved. And then that replacement subcontractor that you find is like 50% more expensive. But hey, it's either you default on the contract and get a black eye on your report card, and it's going to be hard for you to bid on anything after that, or now you have to pay the replacement 50% more or whatever it is, 30% more, whatever it is, and that's going to suck out all your profit. And so because you managed it poorly, you go from like making 10% plus 20, 30% based on how you manage it to 0 or -5. That becomes an absolute nightmare situation. So profitability, we're doing real talk right now. This is real talk. This is what really matters. This is stuff you're really going to come up against. So I think with that being said, guys, if you're taking notes, I won't give you any additional stuff with that. But if you're hot, you're fired up right now, I highly recommend that you jump into a training that I recently created, Win Contracts Faster Without Wasting Time and Money. It's totally free, 35 minutes. Link is below right now. Just scroll down below in the comments, video description, you'll find that link. Log in, and we're gonna cover a lot of additional really great stuff of what to not focus on, what you should focus on, how you should focus on it, what you should do. Pretty much a step-by-step game plan for your next 12 months in government contracting. If you're fired up, you're ready to go. If you haven't jumped in that training, it is recommended for everybody. It saves you a lot of money, it saves you a lot of time, and it's pretty much, why learn all the lessons the hard way, right? Take them from somebody who knows what you're going to be coming up against. And if you happen to be a small business owner, and you're really wanting to reduce like years into literal months in terms of the progress that you can make in the federal space, and you just don't want to mess around, I have recently opened coaching and mentoring, okay? And there's multiple different facets to it. It's not just one thing. So that way it's even more valuable to you. And in that training, at the end of the training, at the end of the 35 minutes, you can also get the link. I also have the link down below though. Should be a Calendly link down below this video, where you can schedule time where we can learn about where you're at in your business, what you got going on, what are you up against. If you are one of these businesses that are serious, not just serious, but it's a right time for you. Because I know a lot of you guys are serious, but it's not the right time. That's A-okay, like we'll be here. But if you're like, let's go now is a good window. Time is recently opened up for you. My mentoring and coaching could be something that could make the rest of this year really, really optimal for you, so that you're really saving a lot of time and you're making a lot of progress instead of really having to do all this stuff on your own, reinvent the wheel, learn the hard way. Not necessarily the most ideal approach to learning something as complicated and involved as federal government contracting, but you can learn from me. I've been in the space for over 12 years. I personally won 32 contracts worth over $15 million and have helped other small business clients to win over $75 million to date. So, we're doing a lot of things right. And so I have a lot that I'd be willing to bet that can benefit and help you, especially if you're newer in the window. So just check for the links down below for that. Feel free to also email us, support@govkidmethod.com. If you can't find any links, you have questions, stuff like that, we'll get you pointed in the right direction. So if you made it this far, guys, hopefully you liked the video. You must have. So smash the like button, helps the algorithm, helps bring our channel to all the people that need us. And if you like my no-nonsense, transparent, bold at times style to government contracting, I'm just super passionate about helping new small businesses in the space, because I see that you guys get ripped off all the time. I see you go down the wrong paths all the time, and you all don't survive it. You don't always make it back because you burn out, you get disheartened. And I just hate to see that. I know a lot of you guys are trying to build your own dreams, be your own boss, help your families, help your communities. Such great causes. Maybe you're retired or you're transitioning out of the military. Maybe you're a college student and you're like, I live at home with my parents and I'm 20 years old, and like this is something that I think I could build a career out of, and I don't have a lot of responsibilities, and let me just learn this and crack down on this, okay? this stuff is all for you. Subscribe to the channel, check out the other resources that I have to support all of you guys down below too. This video went a little bit long, but I hope it was helpful. Until next time, guys, you got this.